Hello and welcome back to another episode of Sharing Wisdom. I'm your host, Angie Wisdom, and in today's episode, we're talking all about making what seems like the impossible possible. And I have the perfect guest joining me today for this conversation. She's a friend of mine and a fellow coach and speaker, and she's the author of the book For Success' Sake. She spent 19 years as a senior VP with Martha Stewart, and now she teaches women and men all over the place to make the impossible happen. Well, Christina, I'm excited to get a little deeper into a conversation. You know, you and I met actually in an Uber originally because we were coming from the airport going to the same destination. And so we were sharing an Uber, and instantly I had this like connection with you. I was like, she's one of my people. So grateful that you are here and we can share this conversation with everybody.
Angie, thank you for having me. I felt the very same way. And I was so glad that we got to share the Uber. And it was you that sort of raised your hand to say, hey, you want to share a ride? And it was one of the more memorable experiences while we were together.
I
That
love it. I
ride was
love it.
special.
Well, I was fascinated when you started talking about your career with Martha Stewart. I mean, that kind of definitely caught my eye. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I want to kind of go all over the place with where you've been in the corporate world and then you going through, you know, the survival and AML leukemia and then really what you've created now. But give me a starting point here. I mean, take me back to when you started working with Martha Stewart, back when you were 26 years old. What was that even like?
Well, I worked at Time Inc., and Time Inc.
Mhm.
owned the Martha Stewart Living brand, owned the magazine. It was just a magazine at the time. And I worked in corporate marketing. And I got that first issue of Martha Stewart Living, and I went through the pages cover to cover. And it was really espousing a lifestyle that I could only imagine in my dreams.
Mm.
And I got the next issue, and I was like, oh, I would just be in heaven if I could work for this brand. So I was 26 years old. And back then we wrote hand notes. I mailed it off to the publisher. I asked him if there were any jobs in marketing that I'd love to apply for. And in like 2 weeks' time, I got a handwritten note back and he said no, like just no. It wasn't like check back in 6 months. But interestingly enough, I was working with a woman at the time in corporate marketing who was running a very big program and I was helping her execute on it. And a couple months after working with her, she went to Martha Stewart Living as the advertising director. I think that you expand your life when you open yourself up to new possibilities. And I had already envisioned what I wanted. And 2 months later, she said, do you want to come work with me? And she also said that there was like a catch. And the catch was that they didn't have a big budget, so that I would have to take like a 20% pay cut. I
Mm.
was probably making the low 40s at the time, and I would have to go mid 30s. I can't remember the numbers, but I remember how I went into complete like, this is impossible. I can't do that. How could I ever live on less money when I work so hard? I took the role and rose up the ranks there, became publisher for a couple of her magazines, was running her media, which was publishing and digital and television, and had the most extraordinary experience and made more money than I could have ever imagined when I was 26
Mm.
years old. And I look back now and I'm not quite sure what made me decide to take the pay cut. But I do believe that I think I took a bet on my future. I still can't believe I did it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting the way you said you dreamed about it, right? You look at the magazine and you're like, I dreamed about this, which you and I both know when we start thinking that and the reticular activating system and what that engages from a neuroscience perspective. And then literally we could say you manifested it, right? That relationship came into your space and gave you that opportunity. So it was like you were already primed for it. And when you're going, I don't really know what made me say yes. You took a bet on yourself, but it was like almost like you were expecting it too. Your brain was expecting it. It already dreamt about it and wanted it.
And in a way, I was rehearsing my future ahead of time. I had dreamed about meeting Martha Stewart. I had dreamed about
Mm.
what their offices looked like. I had dreamed that I was going to be part of her events and that I was going to be helping create the pages in the magazine, which I never did, but I was dreaming of it. And I
Right.
think when you manifest, when you visualize and start rehearsing that future ahead of time, I think that the things open up.
For sure. Did you even know what you were doing in that moment though? I mean, at
No
26, like
idea.
you wasn't like, I'm going to manifest this. You were just dreaming.
I was just dreaming.
Yeah.
But
I think
here's
that's
the thing though. What's interesting about dreamers and doers was a tagline of Martha Stewart Living very early on. There is
Mhm.
a difference between dreamers and doers. And when we are manifesting, I didn't know this at the time. You also have to do.
Right.
So I wrote the letter, right? I had developed a relationship with this woman so much so that she wanted to bring me over. So we can envision extraordinary futures. We can think about the impossible possibilities, but then we have to put action towards it.
Very true. Very, very true. Yes. So you spent a lot of time there, and everyone always likes to talk about the differences between the corporate world and really when you become an entrepreneur yourself. I mean, shed a little light. Like that was your first moment of doing the impossible, right? Taking this pay cut, making this bet on yourself, and moving into that. Do you feel like you also did impossible things while you were there working in that role?
Some might say surviving for 19 years. Here's what is, I think, important for anyone listening is that Martha Stewart was truly a role model and she believed in herself. And her belief in herself was stronger than anything else. She believed that
Mm,
when she graduated from college that she could work on Wall Street, not as an assistant in 1967, but as a stockbroker. She believed in the lifestyle brand. There wasn't any lifestyle brands at that time. It was the first. She believed that she could launch a new category of magazines. She believed that she could launch an ecosystem that was all sorts of media plus merchandising. She believed in herself when she came back out of jail and believed that she could bring back the company to profitability in 2 years. So I admire her for her deep belief in herself. And I'll say one more thing about the belief because it's really kind of fun. She wanted to increase the brand exposure beyond a magazine into television. And the magazine was owned, the brand was owned by Time Inc. And she
mhm.
went to the CEO and said, I want to start a television program. And he said, no, we are a publishing company. We're not a broadcasting company. And she said, what do I need to do to buy back the company? And he said, $70 million. And so she believed that she could get the $70 million. And to make a long story shorter for time here, she went to Kmart and forged a partnership with them, and they prepaid much of her sales ahead of time.
Wow.
So
Wow.
she put a lot of stuff out there in the universe. She believed that she could do the impossible, and it came from belief. And I have had to spend a lot of time believing in myself and believing that I could, overcome health challenges and believing that I could launch my own company and believing that I could help other people, do the impossible. It took a lot of belief. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, right? We have to
Yeah.
believe in ourselves every day, even during the hardest days.
Percent. So do you feel like, because I always love the conversation of who you surround yourself with, do
Yeah.
you feel like that time around her, she kind of permeated into people and radiated that belief? Like, do you feel like you picked up even greater belief in yourself with that proximity and seeing someone in that space always having such a high belief?
Like there's a term that I call audacious excellence,
Mm-hmm.
audacity of excellence. And Martha lived by that credo. And
Mm-hmm.
so she surrounded herself with some incredibly talented, dynamic, creative people who hired really amazing people, who hired really amazing people. The people that worked there were just unbelievable. So we were like a think tank, and it was like getting your MBA in both
Mm-hmm.
in both commercial and personal branding because we were continually striving for excellence. Now there's a toxic side of that as well, right? And I'm being mindful of that as I'm sharing the story with you. But when average was unacceptable and excellence was expected, it really defined us as a group who worked there.
Mm,
I
mhm.
learned from so many great people. They're some of my best friends today, and they're the people. I mean, Martha surrounded herself with incredible talent who helped her achieve incredible success.
Yeah, when you talk about the impossible, like you've mentioned that a few times already, what is it for people, do you believe? Because this is what you are an expert in. You help people all day, every day do the impossible. You yourself have gone through many of the impossible scenarios and come out the other side. So, what is it that you believe even makes that first idea like, well, this is impossible? You even said, when I looked at this is impossible. How am I supposed to live with less money? And people say that all day about things. I could never. That's impossible. What is it for our minds or our belief systems that automatically kind of trigger some of those impossible thoughts?
So you coach on this as well. I mean, we know that most of us are driven by our fears every single day. So we don't even think about the impossible because we think it might be too big. We don't give
Mm,
ourselves permission. And oftentimes we're not even listening to the whispers that are saying that this is like my deep desire. And oftentimes, I mean, we're going into the new year. Oftentimes, when we're looking at our goals and goal setting, we are already limiting ourselves because a lot of people don't like to set goals because they
mhm.
fail on themselves, if you will. They quit on themselves before they've even set the goal because they don't want to feel three reasons why people don't set audacious goals is one, they're afraid to fail. They're afraid to feel failure. They're afraid to feel shame. They're afraid to feel disappointment. They're afraid to feel stressed or worried. So, those feelings, the feelings that we are unwilling to feel, we actually quit on ourselves before we've even tried.
Yeah.
And what we know is that we are incredible humans. And when you think about when have I been disappointed before? Yes, we've managed through disappointment. We've managed through stress. We don't need to be, if we're willing to feel anything, we can do anything. The most successful people are the people that are willing to feel all the feels, right?
Mm,
First reason why we don't set big, audacious goals. The second reason is judgment. People don't set big goals because they think people will judge them for it. Like, do you really think you can author a book? You really think you can be a keynote speaker? We worry what other people will think. We worry
mm,
about those judgments and expectations. And then the third one is I don't know how.
mhm.
So we don't set big, audacious goals because our brain tells us, I don't know how. How is a dream killer? You know, in simplest terms, we couldn't, like when the brain is telling you, I don't know how, it's keeping us small, it's keeping us safe, it's what that brain does for us. But how? We can always figure out the how. I mean, there was Google and now there's ChatGPT. But the how, when your brain comes up with how, you want to ask yourself the question, who? Who has done this before? Who can help me? Who can introduce me? Who knows someone who knows someone? The greatest achievers, the people who achieve the most, are willing to lean into the who's out there to help them achieve the impossible.
I love that. A couple of those points I want to circle back on. The first thing, when you were talking about afraid to feel, I think there's a difference. Like you speak about how we go through all the time, like disappointment and feelings of failure and stuff. But it almost seems like, right, if you're setting a goal, it's like self-inflicted,
Mhm.
right? Like because the possibility is there. When you get blindsided by something in life, by a challenge, by an obstacle, by something not working out the way you want it, when it's uncontrollable, right? You're forced to deal with those feelings. You didn't choose them, but when setting that goal for people, you bring up such an interesting point because it's almost like, well, I may have to feel this feeling, and the anticipation of that is probably what has people going, I don't really know if that's worth the bet,
Yeah,
like if I want to feel that.
it's like a pre-feel.
Yeah.
Like it's the feeling before the feeling. And because
Yeah.
of it, We choose to stay smaller. We choose to stay in place. It's like
It's safer.
it's like a pre-quit. It's a pre-fail. And that's like a double fail when you think about it.
It's a good reframe on it, right?
We have, when we think about it, we felt those feelings before and we've been able to manage through them. But here's the thing. We are afraid to fail. But what is failure?
Hmm.
So think about a marathon runner. When they choose to run the marathon, the first time marathon runners, 50% of people who run marathons typically are the first time runners, 50% of them. And they typically run 5 miles on the regular basis. So when they're going to run 26.2 miles, their impossible possibility, we're not asking them to run double 100% or double that 200%. 26.2 is over 400%. But we've committed to it. And the minute we commit to it, we start our running plan. We start calendaring our days differently. We start
Hmm.
changing our identity to become the marathon runner. Now, if that marathon runner, if she or he gets hurt at mile 18, is that a fail? No, they got out there. They did it. Think about the miles that they ran in preparation. Think about how they grew into the identity of being a marathon runner. And the most amazing thing is that they can come out and run again next year. So it's not a fail, it's the journey. And
Hmm.
so many people are afraid to feel the feeling of failure. What is failure? Because the compounding effect of that marathon runner at mile 18, I mean, their life has changed for the better along the way. And there's still possibility in next year. I
Hmm.
have a client who set a 70% growth for her company. She's a CEO of a company. And her team thought that she was crazy. And her team was actually worried about her. And one of her head of sales came to her and said, that I can't do that. I can't sell that much. And the CEO said to her, but if you could sell that much, what would need to change? And she said, well, I'd
Hmm.
have to sell 7-figure deals. And she said, okay. And so, again, just as we were talking earlier, she opened her mind up to the new possibility. Well, if I was selling 7-figure deals, what would have to change? And sure enough, in a very short period of time, a couple months later, she sold her first 7-figure deal. And that company is coming into the end of their year. And while they didn't make their 70% increase, their increase is in the mid 30s. And that's pretty amazing.
Right, right. So again, going back to, is that a fail? Certainly not. So I'm hearing you say, right, like be willing to feel the different emotions, be willing to reframe that failure and redefine that, right? Let go of that judgment. And then the how piece, I think, is really a big piece for people because they often do go to that. How is that going to happen? And I don't know if you've ever read Change Your Paradigm by Bob Proctor. He talks about different types of goals, and when you go to set goals, it's like there's these A goals, he calls them, that you've done before. Like you're just going to set a goal to do it again. You know exactly how to do it. You've even achieved it. There you go. And your B goal is like this goal that is bigger than what you've achieved before, but you've done the things that it takes. So it's just going to require a little bit more work, but you have the knowledge. And then these C goals, right, are the ones that you don't even know how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like you don't have the experience, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the playbook. And those are the ones that people really tend to set less often because there's this uncertainty. And I know, we're approaching the end of the year here. And when this comes out, actually, it'll be the beginning of the year. But what do you walk through? How do you walk people through that process of setting these big, audacious goals, but also feeling confident in knowing that they can go after them?
So many of us are high achievers. We've been in the workforce and
Hmm.
we've been asked to set goals in our career. And typically, what we do is we look back to last year and we say what worked. And then we say, okay, let's do a little bit of that a little bit better. And so, what are we doing? 10% goals, 3% goals. And we automatically limit ourselves when we set such small goals, because doing what you did last year a little bit better gets you last year a little bit better. That is not an impossible goal. And yes, like public companies, they need to forecast for the Wall Street and the market. I get that. But every company should have impossible goals, because why do we want our goals to be predictable? We don't want them to be predictable. We want them to be wildly unpredictable. And so it's getting people to understand that we don't want to carry our past into the future of our impossible goals. And setting an impossible goal, once we understand what's limiting us from setting those goals, it's about asking, what would be impossible for my company? What would be game changing? I mean, every company that's out there that has been some of the biggest companies of our time have answered a what if question. What if I could change the industry? What if my phone became my computer? What if if people could rent their houses out instead of staying in hotels? They've solved a solution. So companies can ask that question. But so do individuals have to ask that question, like, what do you really want to solve? What is your deepest desire that if you could achieve it would change everything? I mean, for me, it was I always wanted to be an author, and I knew that the process would change my identity. But that brings up a really good point, because I think that Proctor actually said there are two types of goals. There are goals that we set for our business or our company, and then there are identity goals.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So there is nothing wrong. Like, our identity is our identity, even if we miss a business goal. But when we focus on an identity goal, that's where the real growth happens. And we cannot become something that we don't see. So part of setting that impossible possibility, like me envisioning working for Martha Stewart, is that we have to see it first. We have to explore that. We have to imagine that. And those identity goals, it's asking the question, who am I becoming?
Yeah.
You could say it another way. Who do I want to become?
Mm-hmm.
And when you start envisioning, when you start imagining that, we start to feel alive again. We start to think, is it really possible? And remember, the impossible goals, we should know how to get there. And we should be a little terrified. Like, it should
Mm-hmm.
scare us a little bit. And that's a good, scary feeling. And we should be sharing it with other people, not only to hold us accountable, but to support us. But the more we put it out there, the more likelihood it'll happen. And those people will help us get to where we need to get to.
Yeah, agreed for sure. Any kind of ideation around it, processing, talking, I definitely believe enhances that, which is always an important piece for me. I think when you are talking about very achievable goals that you've done before that you know how to do versus the unknown and the uncertainty are two different
Mhm.
uses from our brain, right? Like our left hemisphere is so just go, 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 do what you know how to do and keep doing it. Literally, it's trained to go, how do we do this faster? How do we do this at a higher level? How do we do this more efficiently, effectively? And that is great for achieving those goals that feel like just a little bit bigger than they were before. But the right hemisphere of the brain has to be engaged in order for us to ideate, create, vision, problem solve, come up with that solution for that, problem that's out there right now. So I'm wondering, like, in your process, and maybe for you or for your clients, like, is there a particular practice exercise, or what do you do to really activate that right hemisphere of the brain that allows us to get more into that creative mode?
Such a good question and really good explanation. Because, we are the only species who has imagination.
Yeah.
So, like, our two superpowers as humans are awareness and imagination. I call it human
Mm.
AI, right? So, part of it is becoming more aware of those whispers and more aware of our strengths, weaknesses. It's really our superpowers. Once we become more aware, we can then step into a larger, sort of more powerful imagination. But some simple questions can help you on the process. First, answer, like, where have you done the impossible before? I mean, When we got out of college, it was almost an impossible possibility that we would be an executive at one point, right? Or a C-suite leader. That was an impossible possibility. So really thinking about, did you run a marathon? Right? There are some impossible possibilities that we've all done. So we have to acknowledge where we've already done them. And then answer the question of what are the characteristics and qualities of somebody who could achieve the impossible possibility? Like, is it Oprah? You could pick a person too. Is it Oprah? She is inspiring. She's an expert. She's inspirational. Like, what are the qualities and characteristics of somebody who could actually achieve this? Some people say organized. Some people say future thinking. Some people say dynamic. Go through all of the characteristics. A lot of people say confidence, right? So these characteristics are sort of our beacons. They shed the light on where we need to be focusing. Where do I need to be more organized, right? Where do I need to be more dynamic and adaptable in my approach, right? So the other question is to go through all of the reasons why you can't achieve it. So let's put it out there. I can't achieve it because I don't know how. Can't achieve it because I'm afraid I'll fail. I can't achieve it because I don't have enough time. That is a consistent thing I hear.
Mhm.
So list all of the reasons, because what's interesting is when you look at those reasons, you'll see a lot of them are mindset driven,
Mhm.
really mindset focused. And what we know is that research has proven that there are three success. One research study said success comes from three different things. It comes from components: environment, skill, and psychology. And what the research says is psychology, mindset is 85% attributable to success. So what that really tells us in those characteristics, as well as in those things that would prevent us from achieving it, is that our mindset is what we need to be working on. So how do I build a mindset, build belief in my possibility that I can achieve it? What would I need to believe? So that's the next question. What would I need to believe to achieve it? I have to believe that I could be confident, believe that I could make time. The next question would be, who are the who's? Who's done it before? Who can introduce me to somebody who can help me? And the next question are, what are the bold asks I need to be making to help me achieve my impossible possibility? We need to then begin saying, okay, based on this, how do I rehearse my future every single day? By envisioning it, right? Walking through a day in the life of somebody who's actually achieved that goal. And then saying, if that's what the ultimate day is of achieving that goal, how can I calendar for it today? Like a lot of people would say, I want to 10x my business. We've heard a lot about 10xing.
Mhm.
I believe that 10xing for your impossible possibility, it's all through mindset. So let's say 2xing. 2xing is how much.
Right. That's that left brain side, right? We get more linear. We just do more to create more. And so you get a little bit more of what you have. Yeah. And there's a required output for that, right? When people talk about working smarter, not harder, right? Every time you hit that 2x, you're kind of working harder, right? I'm just going to make more calls. I'm going to spend more time because it's so small. So it's like the 10x is really coming into your impossible goals of like you're going to have to think different. So going back to that question when I'm like, what do you do for the right side of the brain, to really activate that? You've given us so many powerful reflection questions where it is all about, well, who do I need to be? Who's done it before? Where have I done the impossible before? All of that I want people to understand when they get in this idea of like, well, gosh, how do I get creative? It's reflection is a great way to do that. pondering questions and thought does activate that right side of your brain that allows you to come up with different solutions and ideas and the creativity. I always feel like that's such a mystery to people when they're like, well, gosh, how do you stop doing? How do you stop doing? And it's like, just start asking questions, start thinking, you know?
Another reflection is is the pathway to more success, to greater success. And you have to define, we all have to define what success means to
Right.
us. It is not money or titles, right? Those are the outcomes of success. But one of the things I help people see and to work on in their reflection practice, which I believe is fuel, right? It's like putting a match on the fire, is what is your 20%? So the Pareto principle tells us that 20% of what we do causes 80% of our impact. Now, the people who want to do impossible possibilities, it's typically driven by the fact that they want to have a bigger impact, right? So having people go back and actually audit, where are they spending their time? And what is in there where they're spending their time? Where are they in their zone of genius? Like where are they doing work that like 5 hours goes by and they're like, it feels like an hour? Like what is the work that is in your zone of genius that you love doing that if you could do more would cause so much impact? Because once we know that, that's also a little bit of the compass to getting more clarity on the impossible possibility, because it always has to come through that zone of genius. So if people can really figure out what that 20% is, they can work towards spending more time than the 20% in it. And people say, well,
Right.
I have to do the 80%. Like work still needs to get done. And
Hmm.
we work through, because the impossible possibilities is always going to tell you why you can't do it, right?
Right.
So I can't do it because the work still needs to get done. We work through a process it's called ADD, and of course we're trying to take away, but the acronym is ADD. It's automate, delete, and delegate. What can I automate? What can I delete? And what can I delegate? And it's really about becoming ruthless. If you want to spend more time in that zone of genius, you've got to be ruthless with that ADD acronym.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do is capacity clearing,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
really create that capacity for people to step into their impact zone, to be able to focus more, to be able to really do what you've been doing at the highest level to create that text. Sometimes it's not even something different. It's just more of that time in that what you call, your zone of genius. I want to go back to something you said about success because I think this is important given what you have gone through. You said you have to define what success looks like for you, and you so quickly breezed over the fact that it's not a title, it's not a salary or anything like that. So I want to know for you, because you spent a lot of time in the corporate world, what success was defined there, and then you really went through this life-changing experience overcoming leukemia and surviving that to where now you have this individual practice. Did the definition of success change for you from one to the other?
and a lot of why I'm driven to do what I do now is because I don't want anybody to have to go through a health crisis to define success for themselves. Success for me, if you looked at my LinkedIn profile, you'd see these successive titles. I looked perfect on paper and I was really perfectly miserable. I was a high achiever, but I was also hyper vigilant and hyper responsible. And there was a lot of toxicity to that because I was really, my definition of success had been written by somebody else. You know, in part maybe by my mom, right? She was one of those women that were breaking the shards of glass on the glass ceiling. Great role model, but that was her script. And
Hmm.
society has written scripts for us about what success is. So I was leading myself based on what I thought I should be doing. And so when you go through a life-changing diagnosis that AML leukemia, by the time you're diagnosed, you're in critical condition. So I was in the hospital. I think I spent about 68 days in the hospital and nothing was at risk because my life was at risk. So I chose to really see like what got me here. And what I had to really look at is that I didn't like a lot of what got me there. I didn't like that I was running myself ragged. I didn't like that I wasn't spending enough time with my children. So I said, it's time for me to take agency and ownership. You are the biggest influencer in your life. And when you recognize your influence, it's a game changer. So I rewrote my definition of success and decided if by the grace of God I was going to live, that I would live my life successfully. And so I changed the wording of successful and I've added an L, that I was going to be successful. I was going to be full of more joy, ease, and impact. And if you
Mm,
know me, like ease is something that's really hard. I don't do ease well. But what I know is that if I can create impact, it gives me joy. And when I feel joyous, I give myself permission to be easy. So it's a decision filter now. Like, is this impact going to give me the joy? So I use it now to help me make decisions for myself and my life. And I'm living so much more joyfully, not every day, right? But I am much more intentional, deliberate, and consistent about living my life defined by my definition, my success script.
yeah, that's amazing. I wanted people to hear that oftentimes, unfortunately, it does take this rock bottom or this, life crisis, this almost risk of losing your life to really see a different perspective and make those changes. And I love that you're doing the work to help people see that in advance. So like you said, you don't have to have this diagnosis to go, am I really living the way that I want to live? Is success really my definition of success?
And when you think about it, there are so many people burnt out. There are so many people that are exhausted. And we can be intentional, deliberate, and consistent about our success. But we have to stop showing up on default in autopilot with using the calendar as our organizing system. We really have to start taking back that agency, because when we do, we can achieve so much more and we can feel more of the feelings that we want to feel.
Yeah. Define that for me. Like when you've used that a few times, like when we take back that agency, when we have agency for ourselves. Like in your definition, what does that mean for you?
So, in my book, I wrote a book, it's called For Success Sake. I talk about getting decided. And the editor said, "Well, that's not a grammatically correct."
Hmm.
And I really fought for it, because getting decided for me was life-changing. I was decided I was going to live more successfully with those feelings, joy, ease, and impact. I decided that I was going to open up a coaching practice and I was going to become the next best version of myself. So taking back agency is really, who do I want to become? It's the future casting, and deciding what characteristics I want to have, and then saying, okay, what do I need to do to get those characteristics? And being very intentional. As I said before, belief in, like, dreaming, we can all dream and we can build belief in ourselves, but unless we are taking massive action, and for like high achievers that are working really hard, that are really, really busy, this is hard because some of their days are really full with their job. But what it means is that we have to take back our time. And how do we do that? It's about investing in this process of deciding, who am I becoming? It's deciding what my definition of success is. And every single day, reviewing, am I there? Am I getting there? Am I taking the actions to have that impact I want? It's becoming so much more intentional. It's living with more intentionality, not on default, living more on purpose instead of default. And I'm saying, like, your life can change in 5 minutes a day if you,
Hmm.
now, my reflective process, to go back what we were saying earlier, is much longer than that every day. But for people to start out, if they're going to ask themselves three things every day: who am I becoming? What is my definition of success? And what am I doing today to achieve it? I mean, it doesn't have to be a big thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I'm a believer in that with the morning mindset journal and having people just
I
have this
love,
relationship.
love, love your journal.
You're sweet. Thank you.
Everybody, the morning mindset journal, everybody. I mean, it's so wonderful because it's achievable, it's doable.
Yeah,
It's I don't want to say easy, but there is an ease with it that if you
sure.
commit to it, it can change your life.
Right, right. And talking about it, right? Like the reflective questions, and there's lots of different practices you can do. And even the three questions that you gave, right? It's about sitting with yourself, spending time with yourself that creates that relationship. And I want to make sure is we talk so much about who we are becoming. I always like to stress this point to people is that it's not about not being you. This isn't steering away from your authenticity. I like to say it's enhancing your authenticity. You are who you are, and we don't want to change that, but we want to step into the very best version of yourself, the highest possibility for you. And that does mean evolution of who you are. There is change there.
It's you
Mm,
too. It's you too. Or it's
yes.
I don't want to say you
2.0,
better.
right?
No
3.0, 4.0.
and
Yes.
2.0. But someone said, I think it was Chip Connolly said that learning is the fountain of youth.
Mm,
And so longevity is something we're hearing about a lot. And we know that to grow, like if we're not growing, we're not only staying in place, we're probably falling behind. So
yeah.
where do you when you're thinking about who am I becoming, you're not changing yourself. It's you 2.0. It's taking
Yes.
your personal operating system and upgrading it. And that, people who live in the comfort zone, people who live doing the same things over and over again, oftentimes that comfort can turn into toxicity, right?
Yeah. It's so true.
You
Yes.
and I, as women and moms, right? We've become so many things. We've become college graduates, we've become rising leaders, we've become entrepreneurs, we've become wives, we've become mothers, we've become so many things. And at a certain point in life, I hear from a lot of women, high achievers at a certain point in life, they're like, is this it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
All the time.
so the U 2.0, the upgrading of the operating system is really about deciding who do I want to become now?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't even know what version I'm on anymore.
Yeah, me neither.
I mean, I often think I should have kept track, but it's like, I think that when you get into this spirit of evolution and growth, it's these little micro things. I think in the beginning, my belief is it feels like a big macro. When you first step into this space of going, you know what, I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to see myself, hear myself, all of these things. That's such a big change, for someone who's never done anything before. If you've never read a self-help book, listened to podcasts, believe that you could have something different in your life, that first evolution feels massive.
Massive.
But then to me, it feels like these little micro movements, these couple of percentages better every single day, month, year, that just to me brings me so much joy. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you certainly, that whatever version you're on right now, Christina, it's working, sister. I absolutely love it. You
And
radiate so much joy and ease. And I love your company and love seeing what you're doing out there. So
Angie,
I,
I love
yeah.
what you're doing. I love your podcast. I love your books and your capacity, your belief around capacity and how you're helping people change that. I'm learning from you. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll have a little love fest here. And it's just always great to have like minded people in your corner. And like I said, I adore you. And I want people to find you because you're just such an inspiration with what you've gone through. And if there's anyone out there going, I want to do the impossible, I have a feeling there's like little messages and little whispers going off in people's ears as they listen to this podcast going, maybe I can do the impossible. So tell me, I know you've got your book out there for success sake. Where else is it a good place for people to look you up, to find you, to know more about you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Christina Langdon. You can get me on my website, ChristinaLangdon.com. And on Instagram, I'm Christina Langdon, Boss Lady.
Boss lady. I love it. Love it. Love it. Well, thank you for being a light out there. Thank you for sharing your wisdom here today with me and making it seeable and doable for people to go do the impossible.
And how lucky were we that we got to meet each other on that car ride?
Divine intervention right
Great,
there.
great talking to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Sharing Wisdom. If you like this episode, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And hopefully you've got that burning inside of you now, knowing that you can do what maybe seems like it's impossible. And if there's somebody else that you know that has something on their heart that they want to do, but just hasn't really pulled the trigger yet, send them this episode, encourage them and inspire them to go after the impossible thing.